Hey guys, welcome back to the garage. So I know it's been a minute, and to be honest, it's just been a really busy time of year for me. But I have spent many days out here trying to get some more progress done on the RX7. A lot of that just wasn't even really video worthy. It was just cleaning and scrubbing and trying to grind out all that burnt sound deadening. So I didn't really film any of that, but I have been working on the car. So let me show you where I'm at and then what I'm planning on doing today. I know it may not look like much, but it took a real long time to get all of that burnt sound deadening out. You know, I know there was a lot of comments about using dry ice, which would be a good technique if you were dealing with, like, you know, basically regular sound deadening, where, you know, this was burnt. It was almost like the chemistry had changed and it had fused with the metal. So I didn't try dry ice, but if you take a compressed air can, turn it upside down, I did try that, but it just, you know, it literally took grinding and hammering and scraping and chisels. And honestly, if anybody else runs into this issue on their car, my biggest advice would be just a nice sharp, you know, one inch wide scraper and a mallet, just to kind of knock all the big stuff off. And then you can use acetone to kind of eat away what's left. So, you know, lots of scrubbing with acetone and the scraper, and I was basically able to get most of it off. Now, I did try to leave a little bit of a transition because I will be coming back over this with new sound deadening and or insulation, so I didn't want to have like a sharp edge in some of these places. But anyway, so I got all that out. It took forever, a huge pain in the ass. I don't want to do that ever again. Otherwise, I've gone through and pretty much cleaned everything I could in the dash. Went through all the wires. Everything looks good with the wires. I did find a few wires that were like cut off and just taped coming off the ECU. I'm going to guess, without really knowing, but I'm going to guess that has something to do with the security system or something like that, because I haven't noticed anything else in the car that hasn't worked, but I will eventually have to dig into that and figure out what that is, but I'm not too worried about it right now. If I have some before footage or video photos to kind of show you what all this looked like a couple weeks ago, so that you can see it really looks really good compared to what it did. And, you know, I spent some time cleaning up around where the shifter connects into the transmission. The last thing I really need to do is, you know, I do have some bare metal spots now where I cleaned, and there's more on the other side, but so I'm definitely going to go through and tape some of this off and spray some primer over these areas just so I don't have to deal with them rusting. I might go ahead and shoot some primer on some of these other rusty things that where the paint has been scraped off over time. But this was really dirty. I mean, it took scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing, and I got so much crap out of here. It's not even funny. I know it doesn't look like it, but there was so much dirt under the dash, you know, just everywhere. I mean, just crud and grime everywhere. I even found a petrified frog in the dash. So the next step is going to be taping everything off that I don't want to get overspray on, and doing some primer over top of that bare metal. There's a few places like the floor pan plug over here on the passenger side, and a few other things that I've found that I want to go ahead and get some fresh seam sealer on, just to go ahead and get that sealed up. So between the primer and the seam sealer, I'm going to go ahead and do that today. So the Dynaliner product is probably going to be used mostly around the transmission tunnel, and I'm really just looking to get some heat insulation, you know, thermal insulation between the transmission tunnel and the interior cabin space. So this isn't really going to give me a ton of noise reduction, but it will give me the heat insulation that I need now that I've got some exposed metal and whatnot. So that'll be going in probably in one of the next videos. And then I've also got this product called SoundSkins. I've never actually used it, but I've heard good things. This is basically a soundproofing insulation product that is really cool, and I'll show you guys more about that when we go to install it. But this is mostly going to be for the doors and probably the firewall. I'm not really going to do the whole entire car. I'm not looking to do a pro audio competition vehicle or anything like that. So, you know, this is just going to give me some sound deadening where I know the car needs it, and it also improves some heat insulation as well. And then I've got some loose wires that will rattle and or maybe have, you know, become loose. So I've got different kinds of Tessa tape here that I'll go through and patch up some of that wire. But again, that's all going to be probably in the next video. But for the next few minutes, I'm going to go ahead and get prepped for putting in the seam sealer and the primer. So while this is drying, after I get it sprayed, I think today I either need to work on my battery relocation or I need to work on the dash, because I need to take the dash pretty much completely apart, because there's as much dirt as there was underneath the dash, there's about that much dirt inside the dash. So I've actually got the dash over my workshop, and I have seen some broken tabs, and there's just tons of stuff in there that need to be cleaned up. For the most part, I need to get all the ducts, everything, the speakers, the grills, everything taken apart, scrub it down, use plastic restore, whatever I need to do to get all that looking new again. I don't really have to replace anything on the dash, but there are some little connectors and things like that that maybe I need to use some JB Weld, fix back up so that it's nice and solid. I'll check back in after I've got all this primed and this sealer done. I figured I'd come out here and work on the dash so I could let the paint fumes dissipate in the car, and to be honest, I got to probably do a couple more coats of the primer. So anyway, the dash is basically upside down here on my bench, and this is the glove box, and this is where the steering wheel would be on this side. And for the most part, I really just want to take this apart, because a lot of the ducts are, they're not too bad, but there are a few of them that are quite dirty on the inside. I've got, like this one's really dirty. These are the end pieces, and they need to be cleaned up pretty good. But my main focus again is to kind of go through the wiring, make sure there's no more issues with the wiring. I do have some burnt wiring up here from this is what goes out into the center, the e-brake and the center console. But I also want to get this metal frame out, and it's got some surface rust. It's not too bad. I would like to just go ahead and get it out free from all the plastic, so that I can go ahead and clean this rust off and get it painted. There are a few grounding points that I'll need to take care of and make sure that we don't get too much paint on those, so we can clean those off. This must have something to do with the center speaker, which is right down there. It says Clarion, which is an audio company, so I'm not 100% sure, but I think that must be the center amplifier for the center speaker. So I don't necessarily need that anymore, so that's something I can remove. There's some foam gaskets and things like that that probably need to be replaced. They're pretty crushed and warped. For the most part, everything looks like it's going to be like a Phillips head. I know there's a Japanese standard screw too, but number 2 Phillips head works fine. There might be a few 10 mil bolts here and there, but for the most part, it's just gonna be Phillips heads. And so I'm gonna take a bunch of pictures of this before I start taking it apart, and I'm going to keep all my little bits and pieces really well organized, so that when I go to put this back together, I don't have any trouble figuring out what went where. Other than the center console, I think that is everything for the dash that I need to get cleaned up. Like I said, I've got the pieces over here, but sit back and enjoy the time lapse. real time, that took maybe like 45 minutes, you know, maybe, to get all that taken apart. And really pretty much every single fastener was one of these screws, so it's not you know, the ones that are obvious. These little shorter ones, I think there's only 2 locations where there were little shorter ones that go in the center, and then of course the 10 mil bolts are pretty much anywhere you have a ground. So hopefully I'll be able to get this all back. And there were a couple of special ones that held the center vent in, but anyway, there's not that much to keep track of. Everything is quite dirty. I had some difficulty getting this ground off. I really twisted that, but now that it's all taken apart, I should be able to straighten that back out without too much issue. But as you can see, it's quite rusty, and it'll be worth going ahead and cleaning this up. I'll basically take a scuff pad and a wire brush, knock all this rust off, and I may just hit it with primer, like a black primer, just because it's, you know, you're not really ever going to see it, but at least the primer will give it some protection. Luckily, there weren't too many damaged pieces or any real significantly damaged pieces. My vents are all just really dirty and just need to be cleaned up, and then they're quite sticky and gross. So I think once these are cleaned up, they'll function a whole lot better. Yeah, I mean, the glove box needs some cleaning because it's got some crap in it, and I need to see, I'm not sure, I'll need to test and see if this light for the glove box, the trigger, still works. I don't remember it actually ever working, but I'll need to check that or see if it's the light bulb. I will carefully go through all this wiring. Looks like it's all in pretty decent shape. There might be a few locations where I'm just a little ignoring the harness for the radio, the head unit. Just ignore that for a second. But, you know, pretty much the rest of it looks good. I don't know if I'll leave this factory foam on or if I'll just try to take it all off and redo it with the Tessa tape. But, I mean, that's really going to be the only way I can be able to look at the wires and make sure they're good. One of the downsides of doing this, this tear down is that, you know, this is old plastic that's relatively brittle. You know, there's a few thin pieces here that have separated, and I think a lot of these connection points where the screws go in, you know, when you go to put the screw back in, these are all splitting. I don't know if you could see that, but a lot of those have split. So I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do about that, if it's going to be worth trying to go through each of these and putting a little JB weld on them, or just letting them go as is. But for the most part, I got lucky. There isn't too much that needs to be fixed on here. It just is really, really dirty, so it's going to have to get a good cleaning. The next thing is I need to get this outside and get all this rust cleaned off. It's really just surface rust for the most part. So I'm going to be easy, just like I said, knock everything off and give this a nice coat. And then while that's drying, I'll be able to come through and basically scrub, wash, clean, whatever I need to do to all these plastics. I'll clean this center grill up and see if it is okay or if it needs to be painted. I'm not sure if that might need to be painted. And I'll also clean up any of these little metal brackets that I took off. And in case anybody's wondering, this is the speaker that comes out of the center of the dash. It's like a 2.5 inch tweeter. I don't know if this has ever worked while I've had the car, but I think I'm just gonna leave this out because I'm not gonna do a 5-channel setup with the audio system that I'm gonna put in. I don't know if I'll just eventually plan to do some gauges or what I'll do, but I don't think I'm gonna source anything to put back in that spot because most of the amps you're gonna get are gonna be 4-channel or a 5th channel, which is meant for a subwoofer. That's all the parts that it takes to get the dash out. I'll catch you guys next time.